So I was listening to a fan of MREN podcasts, and I was surprised to find out that there's a little municipality in South Africa called Orania, which is predominantly white Afrikaans. Now, it is not totally white Afrikaners, okay? That's a myth, okay? There's a very small percentage of blacks and a very small percentage of coloreds there. So the town, founded by Afrikaners in South Africa, it is located along the Orange River in Karoo region of Northern Cape Province. The town is split into two halves by the R369 road and is 870 kilometers from Cape Town and approximately 680 kilometers from Pretoria. Now, the population percentage is 97.2% white, 1.9% colored, and 0.9% black. The town and its it's not mono-ethnic, and that's actually a misnomer, but its mono-ethnic and monoculturalist ideas have been the subject of much press coverage. The town was founded with the goal of creating a stronghold for the Afrikaner minority group. Now, the reason I'm making this video, I have long promoted the idea that those that wish to promote and will conserve and reserve the white American ethnicity, because they're okay. So, and I'm going to show this both biologically and culturally. U.S. whites are distinct. We're distinct from our European forebears, okay? And we're distinct from one another in many ways. So there's different regional. So overall, U.S. whites are they're one large ethnicity. And then you can break that ethnicity into smaller ethnicities that are separated along both biological and cultural lines due to geography and biology, okay, and culture. So the good news about Orania is it shows that this works. So by 2022, the population, like my idea was that white Americans should be allowed to have reservations like the Native Americans, and that they should be allowed to have self-governing reservations where they're allowed to preserve their unique cultural identity, whether that identity is Midwestern or Western, or whether it's Alaskan, or whether it's Southwestern, or whether it's Southeastern. There should be areas where white Americans are allowed to preserve their unique cultural heritage. And this should be up to the governance of those reservations, okay? Well, so some of these reservations may choose to use, they may choose to use genetics to show who's allowed in. Some of these reservations may have different classifications as to what they consider white and what they don't consider white. Some of these reservations may consider Italians and Middle Easterners to be white. Some of them may not. Some of them some may use genetics. Some might not use genetics. Some might use family trees. Some might use nothing. Some might just say, you just might look at somebody's phenotype and say, okay, you meet the phenotype, you're welcome in. Okay, some might use none of that, okay, similar to the Native American tribes. But the thing is, the United States has a Bureau of Indian Affairs, okay. The least we can do for the forebears of our people, the people that came here and established this nation, is we can create for their descendants, we can create a bureau that looks out for the behalf of the descendants of the people that founded this republic. And the reason that they founded this republic, whether they be Dutch, whether they be British, whether they be Spanish, whether they be French, was for the prosperity and posterity of their descendants, okay? And the preservation of their unique cultures. And again, these reservations, perhaps they want to be Christian, perhaps they wish to be atheistic, perhaps they wish to be capitalistic, perhaps they wish to be communistic. This would be up to the individual reservations. So, the town was experiencing rapid growth, and the population had climbed by 55% from 2018. This is Orania. Living in the town requires application and is based around being Afrikaner. So this is not simply being white. This is a cultural thing, okay? You have to be Afrikaner, and you have to be fluent in the Afrikaans language, okay? The town's economy is focused around self-sufficiency. So a lot of people, there was a dude that used to comment on my channel that would say, white Juchi when? Well, white Juchi now. Okay? There's been white Juchi for a while, and I'm going to show that when I get into different kinds of self-sustaining communities. And, for example, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and things like that. So Afrikaner Calvinism is an important aspect of local culture, while the South African government has stated that it is opposed to the idea of a whites-only community. It has generally ignored the town. Orania printed its own money and maintains the last transitional representative council in South Africa, but receives no national funding. So it doesn't get any funding from the Republic of South Africa. It gets nothing. It is self-supporting. 2 South African presidents have visited the town. Nelson Mandela visited in 1995, and Jacob Zuma visited in 2010. The stated goal of Orania's founders was the preservation of Afrikaner cultural heritage and self-werkzaamheid, or self-reliance. All jobs from management to manual labor are done by Afrikaners. Non-Afrikaner people are not allowed to live or work there. That's obviously not true, because the town has a portion of it that is black and a portion of it that is colored. The town's mono-ethnic philosophy rejects the concept of Baaskap, where the white minority exploited black labor for economic gain, in favor of a model of strict Afrikaner self-sufficiency. Critics accuse the town authorities of rejecting the Rainbow Nation concept and trying to recreate apartheid-era South Africa within a white ethno-state. Residents argue that they wish to preserve their own Afrikaner cultural heritage and protect themselves from crime in South Africa. They also reject the, quote, white label as meaningless, of course, because they're Afrikaner. Okay? And I'm going to get into that, about the genetic history. You will find that white Americans have other stuff in there. They have Native American. They have African American. Okay? The white Americans are not the same as our European forebears. Just as Afrikaners, most Afrikaners contain some black genetics. Okay? So the Orania region has been inhabited since about 30,000 years ago, when Stone Age hunter-gatherers lived a nomadic lifestyle there. A number of late Stone Age engravings indicate the presence of the San people, who remained the main cultural group until the second half of the 1700s. With the arrival of European hunters, trekkers, and Griqua people, the earliest indications of the presence of Afrikaner people in Orania dates to 1762, and in the earlier 19th century, many farmers moved seasonally back and forth across the Orange River in search of better grazing. An 1842 raw stone map shows the whatever farm on which Orania would later be built. The first known inhabitant of what is today Orania was Stephanus Ockert Vermeulen, who purchased the farm in 1882. The Department of Water Affairs established the town as Vlotavsokokral in 1963 to house the workers who were building the irrigation canals connected to Vanderkloof Dam. It was part of a bigger scheme to bring water to the semi-desert central parts of South Africa. Other comparable construction towns like Vanderkloof and Ovestan were also established. Department of Water Affairs changed the name to Orania, a variation of the Afrikaans word orange or orange, referring to the adjoining river. After it was chosen in a competition by 1965, it was home to 56 families. Colored workers who participated in the construction of the project lived in a separate area named Grootgewagd. The first phase of the irrigation project was completed in 1976. After the dam was completed, most workers moved away and the town fell into disrepair. The department completely abandoned Orania in 1989, though some colored people continued to stay on in Grootgewagd. Okay, origins of modern Orania. The idea that Afrikaners should concentrate in a limited region of South Africa was first circulated by the South African Bureau for Racial Affairs in 1966. By the 1970s, the South African Bureau of Racial Affairs advocated the idea of transforming Africa into a commonwealth where different population groups would develop parallel to each other. At this time, mainstream Afrikaners supported the Bantustan policy, which allocated 174,307 square kilometers for the 15 million black Africans living in South Africa at the time. In May of 1984, they saw the establishment of the Afrikaner Volkswagen, an organization founded by Karel Boshoff, a right-wing academic and the son of... What I think is funny is they call everybody right-wing, regardless of what their actual politics are. If you have certain views that they consider unfavorable, you're automatically called right-wing. Okay, I just find it hilarious. He's a right-wing academic and the son-in-law of former South African Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd. Okay, the goal of the Afrikaner Volkswagen was to put the ideas of the South African Bureau of Racial Affairs into practice. Boshoff regarded contemporary plans of the National Party government to retain control through limited reforms as doomed to fail. Believing that the black majority rule could not be avoided, he supported the creation of a separate, smaller state for the Afrikaner nation instead. Okay. In 1988, Boshoff founded the Afrikaner Freedom Foundation. The founding principles of the Avestige were based on the belief that since the black majority rule was unavoidable and European minority rule morally unjustifiable, Afrikaners would have to form their own nation, or Volksstaat, in a smaller part of South Africa. Orania was intended to be the basis of the Volksstaat, which would come into existence once a large number of Afrikaners moved to Orania and other such growth points, and would eventually include the towns of Prieska, Britstown, Carnarvon, Williston, and Calvinia, reaching the west coast. On the 23rd of April, 1994, the Freedom Front, the African National Congress, and the National Party of South Africa signed the Accord on Afrikaner Self-Determination. This led to Article 235 of the Constitution of South Africa, which guarantees the right of self-determination for all cultural groups. Beauchamp's plans excluded the area of traditional Boer republics in the Transvaal and Free State, which encompassed the economic heartland of South Africa, and which of its natural resources, instead focusing on an economically underdeveloped and semi-desert area in the northwestern Cape, the desert state of Orania, because of its inhospitableness, would not be feared or coveted by the South African government. So they wanted to put, kind of like how the U.S. put Native Americans on non-desirable land. Proponents of the idea conceded that this model would demand significant economic sacrifices for Afrikaners who moved to the Volksstaat. The model is based on the principle of own labor, requiring that all work in the Volksstaat be performed by its citizens, including plowing fields, collecting garbage, and tending gardens, which is traditionally performed by blacks in the rest of South Africa. The town's original objective was to create an Afrikaner majority in the northwestern Cape by encouraging the construction of other such towns, with the eventual goal of an Afrikaner majority in the area, and an independent Afrikaner state between Orania and the West Coast. Beauchamp had originally envisaged a population of 60,000 after 15 years. While he conceded that most Afrikaners might decide not to move to the Volksstaat, he thought that it was essential Afrikaners have the option, since it would make them feel more secure, thereby reducing tensions in the rest of South Africa. This is President Nelson Mandela, Betsy Verwoerd, and Karl Beauchamp during Mandela's visit to Orania. In December 1990, about 40 Afrikaner families headed by Karl Beauchamp bought the dilapidated town of Orania for around 1.5 million, what the heck is that, real, I think is what they call South African money. I might be wrong, that might be Brazilian money. On behalf of the Oranian Bestor d'Este, or whatever, from the Department of Water Affairs. In the lead up to the move-in, some 500 black and colored people still lived in Orania, then called Grootgenwagd. 64 families were evicted by the Department of Water Affairs in early 1991 in one of the last large-scale forced removals of apartheid. The families were provided newly built... So, keep this in mind. They were forcibly removed and provided newly built homes. Okay? Do you understand that? The families were forcibly removed, but were provided newly built homes, but were moved away. Okay? At that time, the town, now the Oranians were not provided anything. You get what I'm saying? They have to be self-sufficient. But these other folks that were forcibly removed by the apartheid government, okay, the horrible apartheid government of South Africa, were removed and given newly built homes. The Oranians were not given anything. They received no funding from the government of South Africa. At the time, the town consisted of 90 houses in Orania and 60 in Kleinglück, all in serious disrepair. Okay, but the National Party government led by F.W. de Klerk opposed the creation of an Afrikaner state and the existence of Orania, but it took no action, believing it would fail on its own. The town council was established in February, blah, 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 blah. There were a few jobs available and no money for further development. The town relied on neighboring farms for food. Orania elected its own transitional representative council, temporarily. Now, what's funny, if you ever wondered, now, do you remember when Seattle was taken over by BLM? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone that was taken over by BLM and what do you call it? BLM and Antifa, and it completely collapsed in a matter of like days. Well, if you ever wondered what would happen if you had reservations like the ones I'm talking about instead of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, think about Orania. Okay, so there were few jobs, blah blah blah. The town was in disrepair. A temporary form of local government created after the end of apartheid. Construction of an irrigation scheme, blah 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 blah. And a conciliatory gesture. President Nelson Mandela visited the town to have tea with Betsy Verwoerd, widow of the former Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd. Orania. What's funny is, I'm descended from Dutch settlers, but I can't speak any of this Afrikaner stuff, or Dutch for that matter. Orania grew to 200 permanent inhabitants in 1996. By 1998, 15 million, I think it's a real, had been invested in the town for expenses, including the upgrading of water and electricity supply roads and businesses. On the 15th of 1998, Vali Musa, then Prime Minister of the Constitutional Development in the African National Congress government, stated in the Parliament budget debate that the ideal of some Afrikaners to develop the Northwestern Cape as the home of the Afrikaner culture and language within the framework of the Constitutional and the Charter of Human Rights is viewed by the government as a legitimate ideal. So it is legitimate. It is respected by the laws of the South African Republic. Evolution of the concept. Okay, a policy shift was announced in 2014, blah, blah, blah. Karl Boshoff, External reception. Coverage generally describes Orania as culturally backward, racially intolerant, and separatist. Descriptions of Orania frequently call it whites only, since the town only accepts white Afrikaners. Orania was a ghost town where New York Times said Orania was a ghost town where white supremacists dream of carving out an idyllic homeland. Described it as zealot's dream. A year later, the Chicago Tribune saw it as the last pathetic holdout. The Chicago Tribune, okay, and this is the media. This is the media that's supposed to be objective. Saw it as the quote. Now, to remind you, this is the press. The press is supposed to be objective. If you're a journalist, you're supposed to be objective, calling it the last pathetic holdout of the former ruling class of South Africa, continuing that Afrikaners who once forced blacks to live apart from the rest of society are now living in their own prison. Dubbed Orania the racist Camelot, blah, 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 blah. Regarding the near total segregation of the town and lack of any black residents, which is not true, as you saw from the demographics, incompatible with both apartheid and the Rainbow Nation, yada, 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 yada. Afrikaner reception. Most Afrikaners did not support the establishment of an Afrikaner state in the early 1990s, as they saw it as nothing more than an impractical pipe dream. The largest right-wing party in apartheid-era South Africa, the Conservative Party, did not support the Volksstaat concept until 1993, shortly before converging with other right-wing organizations into the Afrikaner Volksfront. Internal and external threats. Initially, the presence of residents with politically extreme views hampered early attempts. And this is the problem that American whites are having, is American whites need to understand that it's about our civil liberties, it's about our civil rights, and it's about our right to exist as distinct people in this republic that our ancestors founded. Okay? It's not about being superior to anyone else or inferior to anyone else. It's about the right of self-preservation, which the United Nations states that we do have. So, members made up of blah, 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 Afrikanerdom, the Orania, blah, 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 blah. Cultural institutions include Orania Kunsteraad, okay, collection of busts of Afrikaner leaders. Orania is a farming town. It offers few amusements to teenagers and young adults who miss the entertainment offered by city life. things improved considerably with the opening in 2014 of the Okaru shopping center, which also houses a cinema, pizza parlor, and a DVD shop, and the Stokungarka Adventure Park, which also has a pub and coffee shop. This is a monument in Orania. Orania does not celebrate South African national holidays. Instead, it has largely carried over the national holidays from apartheid South Africa. These are the different holidays. Who cares? Okay, religion. Orania is a deeply religious community. Okay, with local churches including Dutch Reformed Church, Apostolika Gluka Laka Laka, Afrikaans Protestante, Protestants Kerk. Kerk means church, in case you're wondering. Okay, Protestant, blah, 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 blah. The Charismatic Movement, yada, yada, yada. The Dutch Reformed Church in Orania was established in 1999. Education, the Oranian supervises all educational activities in Orania. Orania schools have consistently achieved 100% metric pass rate. Okay, so this is the quote, last pathetic holdout of the so-called former ruling class of South Africa. I wonder what the pass rate is for the rest of South Africa. I guarantee you it's not 100%. There are two schools, the CVO School Orania and Volkschool Orania. Afrikaans is the language of instruction, while English is taught as a second language. Both schools follow the IEB curriculum. The CVO school offers a more conservative education, while the Volkschool is relatively more progressive. The CVO, the right-wing extremists have a more progressive school. Oh, wow! The Volkschool, established in June 1991 with Julian Visser as the first principal, uses a self-driven teaching system which is unorthodox by South African standards. It's probably similar to the Montessori method. Because the town had few school-aged children when it was established, the school adopted a computer-based learning system that allowed students of different levels to be taught by a single teacher. The Volks, which is excellent. This is cutting-edge shit, okay? Volkschool's e-learning system was seen as innovative and received attention from South African media in the early 2000s. This is all cutting-edge shit. This is the early 2000s. We didn't get around to this shit until COVID. There is a rivalry between the schools, which is generally friendly but can occasionally become quite fierce. Not all local children attend them, as some parents choose homeschooling or boarding schools in cities such as Bloemfontein, Bukaru, Aplapakada Vocational Training College, offering courses in technical subjects such as welding, metalworking, and engineering, was opened in 2017. In 2019, it started the first course with 5 students. Blah, blah, blah. The economy. About 244 businesses were registered. 244 businesses were registered in Orania. Orania's workforce was employed as follows: 269 service providers, 140 traders, 76 construction workers, 19 hospitality providers, 12 manufacturers, 66 education, 27 agricultural service providers. The town hosts diverse industries from macadamia farming to a toffee factory, a brewery, a call center, stockbroking, architecture, construction. Previously, a permit was required to start new businesses in the town, which was only granted if the new business did not compete with existing ones, which I think is a great idea. The permit system proved unworkable, causing dissatisfaction among residents. The average wage in Orania was estimated at approximately 94,036 real. I wonder what the average wage is in the rest of South Africa, but that is low by white South African standards. But yet I guarantee you these people have more fulfilling lives. In Orania, people from all levels of society perform their own manual labor, similar to Mussolini's Italy, I would assume. Local Afrikaners also work in unskilled positions such as gardening and waste collection. 14% of the population was self-employed. Rapid growth, blah, 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 the Oranian, yada, yada. Agriculture farming is an important part of Orania's economy, the most prominent project being the massive pecan nut plantation. There's a 9 million real dairy farm. Construction industry is an important element, because you have to maintain any place that you have. See, Orania probably has a better infrastructure than the United States does. Administration, this is the system of governance. Private company, the town is privately owned, so it's a privately owned company. No title deeds are provided except for agricultural land, share stocks, yada, yada, yada. So it's a privately owned country. Democratic institutions, yada, yada, yada. Subdivisions and architecture. Orania has 3 residential areas. Many houses in Orania are built in the Cape Dutch architectural style. Territorial extension. The town's territorial originally 300 hectares and was expanded through now it's 2,300 hectares. And the application process. Social welfare. Orania receives no fiscal contributions from either state or provincial government and must generate all funds itself. Orania has a 3-step program of dealing with destitute Afrikaner arrivals: stabilization, rehabilitation, and integration. First, they are supplied with housing, next work, and then land at 10% of market value. Interest-free loans from local. See, this is an excellent way. This is an example of a white Afrikaner reservation. This is a public swimming pool. Law enforcement. Orania has neither, so they don't have a official police force or a prison. Traffic monitoring and minor crimes such as petty theft are handled internally. Volunteers carry out neighborhood watch patrols. So remember when BLM was talking about self-policing and all that stuff, and that's what they were trying to do, and everybody was dressing like superheroes in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and Antifa was getting shot by BLM because they were dressed like gay superheroes. Well, guess what? In Orania, they don't even require a police force. External relations. Over the years, Orania has been visited by many public figures, blah, 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 blah. Elections, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and I'm going to continue with another video, a bunch of other videos on this. I don't know how many videos I'll need to cover this, but it will be quite a few, I think.